My name's Sam Maggs, and I can't believe it's not butter.
I'm Jimmy Adams, and I can believe it's not butter.
Iain?
Hello?
Jamie, I think... Does this mean what I think it means?
We're free!
It's our time to shine!
Yeah, baby, yeah!
Do you reckon we can get away with, anything?
Like swearing?
Maybe. Give it a go.
Okay. I'll go for the big one. Ready? Okay. Oh,
What do you mean you can't swear?
I can't believe this. He's always watching, isn't he?
Anyway, shall we get on with the show?
Yeah. And this is Brainwaves, bringing you the best in tabletop gaming news. And here are the headlines for the week beginning the 6th of August, 2018. Asmodee has been sold. The founder of Fantasy Flight Games, Christian T. Petersen, departs from Asmodee North America. And Kickstarter cashes in on the tabletop boom. All this and more coming up. Tabletop powerhouse Asmodee Group, holders of who knows how many companies now, how many licenses, Days of Wonder, Fantasy Flight, to name but a few, has been sold by its parent company Eurazeo to French private equity fund Pi, or Pay, I'm not sure which one is right, Partners. The value, which includes the amount paid for shares and such like, was announced as 1.2 billion euros, or about $1.4 billion at today's exchange rate. Pi, or PAI, is actually quite a smaller firm than Eurazeo, but has quite a lot of businesses under its wing right now. What'll it mean for all of us, gamers? Really not very much right now. Kind of businesses are being sold and bought a lot of the time. But it's also worth interesting, especially with a company like Asmodee, which has such a, I don't want to say a stranglehold on the market, but it has such wide encompassing arms. I think that's a fair way to put it, Sam?
Absolutely. I think its presence can't be ignored these days. As you went through that list of companies, it's Fantasy Flight, Days of Wonder, Z-Man Games. Did it not absorb Mayfair as well?
It did absorb Mayfair recently,
earlier
yes.
this year. It's crazy, yeah. To see it get sold and to have an actual value of the company released really shows you. We're now in a $1 billion industry, Jamie.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's impressive. What the actual sale of it means for the company, I don't know, and I'm sure we won't really see at a consumer end. They're going to keep on doing what they're doing. I'm sure it's more of a business restructure and things like that.
They gave some clues. They announced some plans for Asmodee, saying in the statement that PAI intends to support the current management team in its plans to grow the business further through international expansion, both organically and by acquisition. They're wanting to diversify the group's kind of main brands onto other platforms as well. So what we talked about previously, we talked about comics, we talked about comics and graphic novels, we talked about video games. I think we're going to see more of that. Talking
about Asmodee's management team, breaking news today, we're recording this on Tuesday the 31st of July, the Christian T. Petersen is departing as the CEO of Asmodee North America. Christian Petersen was the founder and CEO of Fantasy Flight Games for many years until it merged with Asmodee, at which time he became the CEO of Asmodee North America. That was in 2014.
He's helped his business bloom and grow, and even before its acquisition by Asmodee, it was a leader. Looking at the intellectual properties that they had, the games that they produced. Never mind the intellectual properties, the games they produced were doing incredibly well. What they did with the Game of Thrones license, or the Song of Ice and Fire license, before the series really took off.
Yeah.
And especially what they've done with the X-Wing miniatures game, and it is now partly the world.
The Star Wars license was picked up without the help of Asmodee, and that was acquired later. I think one of his biggest gifts to the tabletop community, obviously cannot go unnoticed, is Twilight Imperium.
Yes, hard to miss
So
both design-wise and table space-wise.
completely. I think it's also worth mentioning, if you want to find more about kind of his role, and especially as wider extent Fantasy Flight's role in modern tabletop gaming, go and check out Shut Up and Sit Down's documentary they made. Was it earlier this year? I believe it was.
I believe so, or late last year.
All about and they document the making of Twilight Imperium 4th edition, which is very interesting. Lots of interviews with Christian T. Petersen about starting off in the tabletop gaming industry and really getting noticed, and especially coming to the industry with such a big game, and really opening up that market and that want for big box games that have so much in them. But we wish him all the best luck.
Oh, absolutely.
And kind of, I suppose we want to say thank you for what he's done.
Yeah, we're eternally in your debt. So, we're almost 8 months, by the time we're recording this, when you hear it. It will be 8 months through the year of 2018. But already, tabletop games have been making a huge impact on, many places, but predominantly Kickstarter. I mean, it seems that every time we put out an episode, we've got at least one Kickstarter story. But it seems that of all the money raised in 2018 so far on Kickstarter, a solid 30% of that was tabletop games. Tabletop games.
That's huge.
That is insane. Do you know how big it is, Sam?
I don't.
$80 million in the first 6 months of the year. That's £61 million. $10 million more than they made during the same period last year.
Which I think just shows the rise of the platform and the rise of its key place in the industry, really. We've talked about this, and I think the three of us on the podcast have very, very different views on it, which I think is really good. I'm a person who kind of, it's a bit shy of it, stays away from it. I know both yourself and Iain have backed multiple things on Kickstarter. But I think this really does firmly cement its place as, for better or worse, as a key player in the industry, in the growth of the industry.
1,649 Kickstarter campaigns for tabletop games were launched in 2018. Out of those, 1,048 of them were successfully funded. Although that is actually lower than the first half of last year's success rate. Last year, it was 1,080 projects were successfully funded.
But I think what it's saying is overall those projects are making more money.
Yes. Less projects, more money.
I mean, it's really interesting that this is becoming a go-to place for many publishers. Whether that is because it's just guaranteed sales before production and things like that, it's going to be interesting to see that grow, and whether that ever stops growing, who knows?
I think at some point the bubble may burst. As with anything, it's growing. It's still in its infancy, as I've said before. This is. I know Iain talks a lot about the indie tabletop market, indie tabletop scene, but this is in some ways, a distillation of that. In some ways, it is now an independent. Someone wants to go and make a tabletop game. Okay, they'll kickstart it. They might have.
And
backing.
that's the side of the industry I'm all for, and the side of the platform I'm all for. What kind of does not annoy me per se? I don't think it's annoying, but what I do notice and what kind of saddens me possibly is big name publishers coming on and possibly shadowing those smaller indie games that are coming out, that actually Kickstarter started as a place for the small voices to be heard. And I'm just worried that now it's becoming a more dominant, prevalent role in the industry. Are those small voices going back to being small voices, and actually not getting that breakthrough chance that platform was originally set up to give them?
I think it comes back to marketing. You might have the best idea in the world, but as long as if you can't market it properly, it's sad to say, then, it might fall by the wayside. Or maybe that's what the bigger a company like Steve Jackson Games or Cool Mini or not have that ability. They have not only the reputation, but they have the money for the marketing to go, this is what we have, here's how we make it look interesting to you.
Tabletop games being responsible for 30% of Kickstarter's income is crazy. That actually I suppose I would regard as a small industry. If you talk about globally, it's a niche hobby. This isn't necessarily a vastly popular thing. That it's taking up 30% of one of the biggest fundraising platforms online, probably the biggest, is incredibly impressive, and it would be great to see where that goes. Speaking of cool money or not, the publisher have just announced a board game version of everybody's favourite classic cartoon, Hanna-Barbera's Wacky Races. This is quite exciting for me. I say that. I'm not a particularly huge Wacky Races fan. I love Hanna-Barbera's stuff. But really, this just looks really cool. Cool mini or not, these are definitely cool minis.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Cool minis, and it's that kind of fun. You're playing unique styles of vehicles. Apparently, it's going to be playing 2 to 4 players with races taking 10 to 15 minutes.
I think that's perfect.
That's
really
really
lovely,
good,
isn't it?
nice.
Whether this is going to be more Formula D, more Gorka Morka, we're yet to find out. It looks like each character has their own set of unique abilities based on their in-show abilities. And it just looks good fun. The minis look fantastic. The artwork is Hanna-Barbera artwork. It looks absolutely fine for what it needs to be. It looks fantastic. Looks like a modular board that you put down as well. I've also heard that Dick Dastardly and Muttley are AI controlled, is that right? Going around the board causing havoc for the players.
I do believe so. That's quite nice.
And hey, it looks lovely.
I'll be the devil's advocate here. It looks lovely. I think it sounds like a really nice game. My initial worry is of course it is. It's nostalgia primarily.
Yeah, I was going to say, does it go back to something we've talked about many times on the show, of that nostalgia power getting over, that nostalgia power creeping over, and that actually the IP is selling the game, and not the game itself. And maybe that's something we can talk about a bit later in the show, Jamie.
That's quite possible. Veering slightly back to Kickstarter, recently there was a campaign for a board game based on the musical comedy drama Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog from 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been 10 years. Raised a fair bit of money, looked to be quite nice, and then 12 days before the end of the campaign, they had to cancel the funding. The campaign was from the publisher Lucky Troll Games and designer Nicholas Engel, and he'd planned for the board game to be out in 2019. However, 12 days before the end of the campaign, he had to cancel things. He said attempts have been made and are being made to contact both the company, who currently holds the rights to the IP, and Joss himself. They have a copy of the prototype. They've been informed of everything we've done. The thing is, it seems to be the guy was unable to get the license.
Which sounds a bit crazy to me. I don't know why you'd go into the Kickstarter campaign without securely knowing that this is ever going to be a product. I feel that every podcast, and I've said this in the past, every podcast we're talking about some shady Kickstarter deal that's going on.
I don't think, in no way I believe this was shady. I believe it was.
No, I'm not saying it's shady. I mean, it just seems a bit silly. Like, why are you kickstarting for something that, one, you don't have the rights to, two, you don't have any inclination necessarily that you're going to get the rights?
It might be that they attempted to approach the IP holders and or Just Read to try and get the rights while the campaign was going on, and if they haven't been able to get a hold of it, they just kind of have to go, right, this gets to a point where we've got to stop kind of hoping it'll be all right. We've got to take action.
Well, the creator did say we'll go back to the drawing board and do this right, so it'll be interesting to see if they do secure the license, and maybe if it heads back to Kickstarter any time, possibly within the next few months.
What's that, Sam? Is that a jazzy little rhythm I hear? Are we about to go into...
Oh, I think we are.
Oh.
What's in this corner? Looks like RPG corner. Books and rules. All the latest RPG news. RPG corner.
Oh, this is very comfortable over here.
Oh,
I've got a nice armchair.
I forgot how good these chairs are.
Oh, next to a roaring fire as well. Why don't we call the whole show over here?
Nah, so you can't have too much of a good thing, Sam. Can't have too much of a good thing.
Possibly that might be it. Oh, what's the first thing on the shelf?
Let me get this down. Oh, have a look at this. This is the Expanse role-playing game from Green
Ooh.
Ronin Games, or Green Ronin Publishing. Now, The Expanse, for those that do not know, is a science fiction...
I don't know.
Here we go, Sam. It is a science fiction series of books by James S.A. Corey, which is the pen name of Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. They've done about 7 or 8 books over about 6 years or so. And over the past couple of years, The Expanse was made into a TV show. They've done 3 series. I'm halfway through the second series, and I'm quite enjoying it so far.
Currently on Netflix in the UK.
Yes, it is.
I'm right.
We're not getting paid by them to say that. We just like it. But they've also announced a role-playing game based on the series, using the Adventure Game Engine, or Age. The rules found in Fantasy Age, Blue Rose, and Modern Age. The Expanse role-playing game is taking players to the setting of The Expanse, where the solar system is in contention between people who live on Earth, those who live on Mars, and those who live in the asteroid belt, known as Belters. Now, it's interesting.
This seems to have come full circle.
It has come full circle indeed.
Very much so.
Because
starting out as a setting for an RPG.
Yes, setting for a Traveller game.
Then going to a book series, as you rightly mentioned.
And then TV show, and now coming full circle, back into a role-playing game of its own mould.
Merit.
Yeah, merit. That's even better.
So when can we expect to play The Expanse?
Oh, well, they've got a quick start guide, or a quick start on the Kickstarter page right now. It's a 40-page PDF. They're expecting to deliver it around January 2019. And at the time of recording, there are 22 days to go left on the Kickstarter. If you've enjoyed The Expanse,
check it out. Oh, there's some more. There's a couple more books up here, Jamie.
oh, go on, Sam. What have you
Oh,
got?
it's quite high up the shelf.
Oh, I'll get it for you. There you go.
Thanks so much.
There you go.
Oh, now this is something I do know about. Now, talking about The Expanse being RPG to book to show to RPG, this is something that is book to RPG to show.
Oh ho.
And that is with the announcement of Amazon securing the rights for Tales from the Loop.
Ah.
Yes, we are legally obliged to mention that this is similar but legally distinct from Stranger Things. Tales from the Loop is a alternate timeline 80s. The story goes that the governments of the world invested a lot of money into science and technology after World War II, and saw a technological boom throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the 80s that we find ourselves in. Set in Sweden, the Loop is a community that lives within and works around a large Hadron Collider. In Tales from the Loop, you can expect to see robots, maybe a bit of time travel, maybe a bit of flying haulers that transport your goods from A to B through the sky. The RPG was originally based on an art book by Swedish artist Simon Starlehag. I'm very sorry if I have no idea how to say that name. Simon. He's a beautiful artist.
He is a wonderful artist. They're amazing pieces of art. That is, you know, as is described in the Kickstarter campaign in a lot of places, you know, that 1980s suburbia Sweden, but with fantastic machines and strange beasts.
It's a wonderful setting. And if people don't know a bit about the RPG, I suppose that's what we can expect to see in the TV show, as it seems to very much be Amazon saying, "Oh, Netflix have got Stranger Things. We should have a Stranger Things." It seems fantastic. I really, really enjoy the setting. And it'll be good to see how that develops into a TV show, throughout the next few years. Oh, there's something on the bottom shelf that I've never noticed before, Jamie.
Could you get that for me? I don't want to bend down. I've got a bad back right now.
No worries. Oh, everyone's favourite. It's D&D.
Oh, it's D&D. D&D have just announced 2 new source books. One has come out and one is been announced. That is A Wayfarer's Guide to Eberron. Eberron being the kind of pulp-esque adventure kind of fantasy world that was released in 2004. We're now getting an update for 5th edition. And also an announcement for The Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Ravnica is a merger with the world of Dungeons & Dragons, with the world of another intellectual property that Wizards of the Coast holds, that of Magic the Gathering.
Very interesting move.
Wizards of the Coast every month or so puts out on their website a document called Unearthed Arcana. It's trialing some new mechanics, some new playstyles, and they have brought out stuff for combined Magic the Gathering in the past, and now they're getting a full book. In fact, it should be coming out in about October this year. Now, I've never played Magic the Gathering at all. I don't know, what Ravnica means in that world.
But yeah, I think it's just an interesting crossover. Obviously, it's almost an obvious one, really, and I'm surprised it's taken this long to come through in that sense.
A lot of the previous books that have come out, apart from the first three, have all had some sort of focus in the Forgotten Realms. So
yes.
Xanathar, Guide to Everything is a beholder from underneath Waterdeep. And yes, we've had, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes from Greyhawk, I believe. And we have had a little journey to Ravenloft, but now we're actually seeing some more settings being explored.
And it's new settings as well, I think, is the important thing.
Eberron is not a new setting. That's been out for about 14 years. But yeah, Ravnica, I think, might be a new setting for Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, that was toasty, but
that was nice and warm.
Alas, I feel we need to leave.
Come
We
on.
have outstayed our welcome.
Come on, Sam. After the cozy seat of RPG Corner, it's time to move into our discussion series, Brainstorm.
So today on Brainstorm, I can't believe I get to do the intro, Jamie. We're going to be talking about IPs in gaming. And we're going to discuss how important is it that a game has an established brand behind it, something that's come up in many of the news articles we've spoken about today. What's your initial thoughts?
My thought is I don't believe it is necessary. I believe it does put certain expectations on it, which can have both positive and negative consequences. Positive in that you're sure you're going to get X amount of sales because people go, it's a board game based on that thing I like. This hopefully will be all right. And at the same time, those people who may buy it go, I bought this. This isn't very good. I'll need to tell people that it's not very good. And I'm disappointed because it let me down as a fan of this intellectual property.
Well, we touched on it earlier with the announcement of the Wacky Races board game. And I think this is something where, and I think it's interesting to say, would that game have been made without that IP? I think that's also another conversation. That actually, is it these games influencing the board game and the mechanics there? Someone's looking at an episode of Wacky Races and thinking, this would make a great board game. Here's what I can do. Here's how it can piece together. And before you know it, there's the game and it's coming out from Call Me On Up. At the same time, obviously, that IP is a big draw for a customer base, where if it was a brand new IP or it's just something that no one's really bothered about, is it going to get the same attention?
I know we've used the K word a lot this episode, but, well, really, if you want to judge the public mood, and by public I mean, the general board game community, look at something like Kickstarter. You've got games like Big Trouble in Little China, the board game, based on the film. You've got Cthulhu Death May Die from Cool Mini or Not, based on H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos. This stuff, and then you look at another Cool Mini or Not game like Rising Sun or Blood Rage, games that are not have their own IP per se, but they're based on just a cultural mythology. All these games have one thing in common in that they've done incredibly well. Now, partly that might be due to Cool Mini or Not's reputation for the latter three. But especially for the first two, it might be that people have gone, I really like Cthulhu Mythos. I like Big Trouble in Little China. I'm going to back that because I want to play a board game with it, and I'll have the miniatures, going back to what we said last time.
Yeah, and I think this goes through so much of what we've talked about on the podcast, really. Not just today's show, but the podcast in general. One of our very first news articles was about the announcement and release of Fireball Island, which we feel... that's coming from Restoration Games, a company who solely make those kind of nostalgia-fueled games from times gone by, and they're bringing them back.
I think the difference there, though, is Restoration Games is intellectual property that they were games that people played. A game like the Doom board game is... I've played Doom as a video game. I know the Doom intellectual property. Is this going to give me the Doom experience? And I think, is this going to give me a flavour of the insert intellectual property here experience? Is really what I guess what makes what can be kind of subjectively described as a good game of that kind.
Yeah, so I am admittedly a big fan of a lot of Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. And I have to fully admit that, the reason I have so much Imperial Assault, say, is because it's Star Wars. And I honestly do get that small commando squad-based feel from that. That actually I do think that game really quite accurately portrays what it's trying to with the IP. On another hand, I said for many years I played the Lord of the Rings LCG. I would never have got into that game if it wasn't for the IP attached to it. I am going to that game for a Lord of the Rings experience, for a Star Wars experience. And I don't think you can ignore that in modern gaming.
No, not at all.
So many of the big name games out there that are, driven by that IP. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, in no way am I saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying there's always that certain expectation that's going to come with it, but will also allow you to reach another level of audience and go, I've never played board games before, but that's a Star Wars board game, let's say, and I like Star Wars, so I'm going to play Star Wars.
Yes, I think we're just very lucky at the moment that a company that knows, for the most part, how to make board games holds that license. It being one of the biggest IPs in the world. And such a draw for new players that actually, and Star Wars is coming back these days. Not that it ever really went away, but, it's become a lot more prevalent and dominant in media.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek. And I've seen Star Trek Panic has been released, which I've never played. I have quite a few ships. I've played a fair bit of Star Trek Attack Wing, and for a while I really enjoyed that. It was like X-Wing, but allowed kind of capital ship-esque combat. I've kind of gone away from it a little bit recently. I had a bit of trouble with Star Trek Ascendancy.
Yeah, we both did. Yeah,
but that's.
I think that could have been so much more than it was, but that's
another.
But this is what I'm. Okay, this is one of my points I wanted to make. It's when you get stung by that. Actually, we had a friend who bought Star Trek Ascendancy.
We've been talking about it for months.
It's a Star Trek game. It's a Star Trek game, and that's why he wanted to buy it. That actually it looks like a grand strategy combat Star Trek game. And that's what he wanted, and we bought it, and it was just a bit of a dud to us, at least, and to many people. There is a community out there that do praise it. Their reasoning behind that. We can't fully get on board. But another game that fits into that category there would be the Labyrinth board game from Riverhorse Games. It being, look at this IP that you love. Look at these it's got David Bowie in plastic, which fair enough I think is fantastic. Not that the miniature's fantastic. But it's definitely drawing on the IP. There's nothing else selling that game. And when you come to play it, I think if that's your intro to board gaming, you're not going to play any more board games.
Well, you might. It's certainly different. I'm not saying personally I didn't find a lot of fun of it. I found it quite repetitive, and I didn't feel...
Oh, completely it was. There wasn't anything there.
But yeah, that's the thing. Could the argument be made, is that a lazy example of, you've basically just slapped the IP onto it, you slap the name onto it and expect to get it.
We've talked in the past on the podcast about Space Goat Games on Kickstarter. So 2 successful Kickstarters, but ultimately hadn't been delivered at all, either of them. So the first is Evil Dead, and the second is Terminator board game. It's now assumed, I think, by a big part of the community, that they used the Evil Dead campaign to possibly raise money and buy the license for the Terminator game. And obviously things there just didn't work out and they haven't actually been fulfilled. But, that's a company there relying on IPs to sell the games. So it's kind of like, well, how prevalent is that? Not necessarily in the industry as a whole. I think there's a lot of games companies out there doing some really good things. even when you call them like abstract games and things like that don't need an IP to sell them, that actually you can just sell on a designer, or you can sell on the fact that you are someone like Days of Wonder who don't use IPs. So really, I think it comes down to two different camps. I think there's a lot of people out there who use an IP to sell a game, as we've talked about, can be detrimental to the hobby sometimes, when actually the game hasn't got much weight to it itself, but the IP can be quite big, such as Star Trek or things like that. And then there's the other camp, I think, that really just enhances a game by putting a strong theme behind it that people are familiar with. Write into us, get in touch and tell us your thoughts on this subject. You know, how important is an established brand when you're out looking for new games or getting excited about games? Is an established IP on your checklist, or is it something you try to avoid more? Let us know.
And finally, on Brainwaves, Sam, I don't know if you're too young to remember the computer game, The Oregon Trail.
I'm too young to remember it, but I do know what you're talking about.
I'm also too young to remember the Oregon Trail, but I'm aware of it through other sources. The famous now computer game originally started as a piece of edutainment, where you're pioneers taking your wagon across America, journey to Willamette Valley in Oregon, and on the way,
famously die of dysentery
halfway through. And there have been, over the years, there have been several board game attempts at it. There's been some card games. There's been a board game in the early 80s, and now we're trying it again. The Oregon Trail, Journey to Willamette Valley. It's simulating the computer game, 2,000 plus miles from Missouri to Oregon. But this time, the game is going to be designed by Daryl Andrews, who is famous right now for co-creating the dice placer, stained glass loving Sagrada.
Yeah, I think this goes back to that, like what we were saying just there in the Brainwaves segment, is this going to be more nostalgia and IP-fueled success? Who knows? It's interesting to say that this is the third or fourth time they try to make an adaptation of this. But it is a well-loved video game. If this can get that classic feel of kind of trekking across America and trying to survive, it looks cool.
We'll see what happens as more information emerges. I mean, this is an early announcement. The board does look a bit more involved than previous installments, and also I think, as you say, you've got that almost confidence of having a name like Daryl Andrews at the helm.
Well, we'll see where it goes, and maybe we'll give it a little update when it's out.
Quite possibly.
I'm just going to sneak in with another bit of news, Jamie, whilst Ian's still not here.
What? Are you sure about this?
He's been keeping this quiet. He doesn't want it announced. I don't think he wants us to talk about it. But I'm gonna break the silence. Here, Brainwaves exclusive. It's not Brainwaves exclusive. There's a Love Island board game. Pair up and take on hot challenges to be crowned the ultimate Love Island couple. It's perfect for singles or couples. It's a bit of a spin the bottle game, giving players dares and challenges to work through a crazy night. It doesn't actually look anything special. It doesn't look anything. I can kind of see why Ian maybe doesn't want it mentioned.
Listen, love it or hate it, especially in Britain, Love Island is here to stay.
It is. And, perfect ending to this edition of Brainwaves.
Yes.
This is something that is very strongly going to be sold on its IP. And probably is not
poetic.
A perfect intro to gaming as a genre. Be warned out there, everyone. Have a good time.
Just before we go, we want to say thank you to our new Patreon subscriber, John from Earth 2 Games, maker of Masters of Gettown, which we're hoping to get a preview copy of very, very soon. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you've listened to, then the best way to help us out is to share the podcast, drop us a review and a rating on iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at The Giant Brain, Instagram, Giant Brain UK, Facebook, The Giant Brain, website, giantbrain.co.uk, or email us at giantbrainuk@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening again. Take care, everyone.